Kimmy is clearly ready for class. Today is the big day. My hair's still wet because I was running late. I didn't even put on foundation, but again, my webcam ain't so great, so why am I bothering to put on foundation? But I literally could not like fall asleep last night. I was so excited for today. Today is the editors and agents panel. It felt like Christmas, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like tomorrow's Christmas and I'm opening presents. And as always, whenever the Zoom meetings are late to start, I'm really paranoid that it's me. And so now it's 10:06, it hasn't started yet, so I'm like, oh my god, is it me? But I don't think so. This happened yesterday, so I think I'm alright. I'm gonna finish having some coffee, and as always, I'll report back. I'm pretty sure we are meeting with the editors first. So we'll see how it goes. Kimmy's gonna be in here with me while I film this. Okay, I have to not be too long-winded because Zach has informed me I have to use the bathroom, and I always scold him for going to the bathroom while I'm filming in here. You can hear it. Alright, so we just did the editors panel thing, and I am so sorry to report I did not sell my book, but neither did anyone else in our group, so at least there's that. To start off, this was a concern I had when I noticed the list of panels, or the list of editors in our panel, but I wasn't sure how it was going to play out, and unfortunately it did kind of play out the way I feared, where they were all magazine editors, so they were not editors for a publishing house. And I don't intend to publish any kind of short stories or pieces in a literary magazine. It's just not the style of writing that I want to look into doing. Seriously, Kimmy, I have to let my cat out. Hold on. You're gonna go out? Go out. Bye. The New Zealand family is a lot today. And so I was kind of worried like how that would affect my feedback. And I think the editor we got, her name is Carolyn Quebler, and she is in the New England Review, or part of the New England Review. She's an editor for that magazine, which is so cool. It was such an honor to meet her. And she did give really good feedback, which I'll get to in a second. But she did say the reason that she would pass on my piece was that it wasn't the right genre for the magazine. And so that just kind of was a little discouraging, because it was like, oh, well, that's not helpful. Like, because obviously I wouldn't submit to this place. We were just assigned a random editor. So when we do like feedback for this course, I made a note saying I wish they had a little bit more diversity of editors, and also maybe a little bit more of a selective pairing, just because it was going to be, because I've gotten editorial notes before. One of the things I thought was going to be really valuable about having a professional editor look at it was how it would relate to my genre, like having that set of eyes on it. Because like a lot of professors I've had, or not even how it relates to my genre, but more like how it would relate to the eyes of the publishing world, because you can write a really beautiful piece and have it edited, but someone still might not want to publish it. And I was curious, like in my specific instance, why, other than it just wasn't for the right magazine. And that was kind of the only reason I was given, and that just kind of was discouraging. But with that said, she gave really fantastic feedback, and she is a professional editor, so it was really cool to have that feedback. And a couple of the things I actually had already changed, because I submitted this on Monday, and this week I've been working on my piece, and I'd actually noticed some things myself and changed them. So it was encouraging to have that validation that I made the right call. One of the things that I'd noticed too, she said that sometimes I would slip into, she worded it like self-conscious writing, where it's where you're trying to be literary, and it's distracting from the storytelling. And so I'm really bad with descriptions, and I kind of have to like go back and add them after I've told the story I want to tell. And she basically kind of like validated that I don't always have to do that. I think there are some descriptions that I've written that I think are really beautiful and help set the scene more, but I definitely in some instances took it too far where it just wasn't necessary. And at one point, no one actually had told me this as feedback yet, but it was something I myself had changed, and she gave it as feedback too. And so that to me was like, oh, okay, so I did make the right call, which was nice. It was that, it's a small detail, but my main character's grandfather, I am introducing him for the first time, and the first time I gave his full name, like his first name, last name, and she said since this read like a very close POV to my main character, it took her out of the story to say the first name, last name, because that's not how my main character, Paul, would address his grandfather. So you can say like the first name, but just it wasn't necessary to have the last name too. And I completely agreed, and when I was reading it back myself before this meeting, I actually made that change because I thought like, oh, this kind of, it does take you out a little too distant third, which I didn't want. And a small note, she said she hates the word impossibly, and I used it, impossibly. It just made me laugh because I was like, I kind of used that word intentionally. That comes a little bit into play later, but I agree that where it was used, basically I used it to describe the crystal skull. I said it's impossibly smooth, and that is going to come into play later in the fact that one of the ways that you authenticate a crystal skull, like, and this is in real life, one of the ways that they, I mean, you can't really authenticate it as far as like magical qualities, but one of the mysteries of the real legend of the crystal skull is some of them are impossibly smooth in the sense that you can't really see tool marks. And so that's like the message I was trying to portray, but I realized it does kind of look weird because like it just seems unnecessary in that part. And you don't learn until later why it's, my thinking is, was necessary. But I think I am going to get rid of it just because it gave her pause, and when I was reading it back, it kind of gave me pause too, and so I can get that message across later in the story. Another thing I hadn't thought of and I hadn't heard feedback on, so that sometimes that means if I hadn't heard other people give feedback on it, it wasn't a cause of concern, but I did, after hearing her say it, it made me think, you know what, maybe it is something I could just a little quickly clarify. I don't mention the time period it's in, however, it takes place in rural Maine, and so if you've never been to rural Maine, rural Maine can feel pretty dated. There's like no stoplights, no sidewalks, shoddy internet. A lot of people still use real fireplaces to heat their homes. That is a little bit more dated, but it's not unheard of. So I like mentioned like that the fireplace like heated the home just because I wanted that setting. And so she actually was confused if it set place in the past or not. And I never, in the beginning, I don't clarify that. I think it becomes very clear. So she just read my prologue. And in the prologue, I guess I don't really clarify that, but the first chapter, it does become very clear that it's present day because they're out driving in their car, and I reference a lot more technology things. I reference YouTube, like it becomes very clear it's present day. So I don't know how much that is going to be necessary for me to do in the prologue alone, but it is something to think about if I want to include just a small nugget to kind of give you a hint that this doesn't take place in the past, because I mentioned the 1950s. But that was it. And I guess I can see how on first read you might see the 1950s and think, oh, that's when this takes place, and you don't realize that's more of a flashback. So it's just something to think about. And then other stuff was just like really minor stuff, but minor stuff is always really helpful because it's something I can apply in my writing later when I remember that. And this is where I'm wondering if it is more of an age thing. So when you write for middle grade and young adult, sometimes that writing style is spelled out a little more than, say, literary fiction, especially literary fiction. Literary fiction to me is a lot of like, it's way more showing than telling, and I think the younger you get, the more you tell, just because a young or first reader, like a child, they're not going to quite pick up on those cadences of like, I don't know if I use that word right. They're not going to pick up on those cues as well. Like, you do have to spell it out for them more. And so there's a couple times where I admit that I sort of spell it out more than I should have, like just saying something like, and then he saw something unexpected, or he saw someone doing something, his grandfather did something weird. And she said like, oh, that's not necessarily necessary in her opinion, but I don't know. I'm not committed one way or another. I would be really curious to get feedback from a young adult editor to see if they felt that was more genre appropriate as far as like a young adult style written book. I think young adult style and adult, there's not crazy amount of differences in my opinion, other than I think there's pacing expectations that are different, and potentially a little bit more telling? I don't really know. And I guess that's the point. I don't really know. And so I really wish I did have a young adult specific editor who could give me that feedback. I did take a class in young adult fiction, but this was like, that was one of the first classes I took, and I didn't even know the right questions to ask then, and I almost wish I could go back. I'm sure I could email my professor if I have questions like this, like as far as more differences between young adult and adult fiction. But anyway, yeah, so she did give really good feedback, and I don't want to sound unappreciative of that, because that is such a unique experience to have a professional editor like look at your work and give advice. It's very rare in the field. Most of the time when you submit things to professional editors, and I should say not like freelance editors, but like editors in the publishing industry, which technically she is, it's a magazine, it's a published piece. Usually you don't get feedback from them, like if they're gonna reject you, and this is something I'm sure you've heard before, but like if you get rejected by an agent or an editor, unless they like really like you and or they really think the piece is promising, but they do have some advice and they have the time, they're not going to tell you why they're rejecting a piece. They're just going to either not respond, or they're just going to send like an automated rejection. They're not going to do like very specific things like what she gave me. And so that was really helpful. But again, like the only thing that she listed as the reason she was rejecting it was because it wasn't for that magazine. So, and that's, I'm not blaming her on that, because that was the instruction that they got as editors from our professors. And so, yeah, I just kind of wish, that's one thing I think could improve with this writing residency, is having more diversity of editors, specifically for this section. And it's such a small part of the residency program, but specifically for this section, I think it would have been extremely valuable to have feedback from an editor who would actually relate to my piece. That is that. This afternoon, we have the agents panel, and I don't think that they've read our piece, and so I have no idea if like what kind of knowledge they're gonna come into it. I'm guessing they probably didn't read any ones, just because why, I don't think they were even sent them. And so our people said like, oh, if you want, if it feels natural, you can feel free to pitch your work to them. And I'm just like, it never feels natural to me to do that. I mean, not that I've been in that situation a lot, but just like anytime, even just like a casual person I'm talking to at a party pre-COVID days, like finds out that I write, they're always like, oh, what are you writing about? And it's like, I can't even describe it to you, and you're not like an agent. So I was gonna actually go through the class I took last fall, which was the art of the pitch. I think I wrote a pitch for my story, so I'm gonna go through and at least just have that up, just in case our agent's like, hey, everyone, pitch me your work. Oops. But I think my pitch still wasn't good. Like, it was better than it was before that class. Like, I definitely learned a lot, but I'm just not good at pitching, and it sucks. And it's gonna come with challenges, but I think a lot of people are in that boat. So I do hope, because again, we're gonna be randomly assigned an agent. I'm pretty sure is probably how it's gonna go, and I kind of, part of me hopes, I don't know, maybe they'll surprise me. It would be nice to be assigned to an agent that's actually related to our genre, because there is gonna be some, I think there's a lot of overarching advice from agents that's going to apply no matter what your age group is, but some advice is very genre specific. So I hope at least that I'm with someone who's worked with young adult fiction before, because I know some of the agents on the panel are in that genre. None of them are exclusive to young adult, but I think there's not many agents left out there that limit themselves to just one age group anymore anyway. All right, I am really tired. Today's probably one of the most tired days I've been. I think just it's day 7 of little sleep, and I'm just like struggling. So I think I have like an hour and a half left before my agents panel starts. So I'm gonna take a nap. I'm gonna take a nap while Zach cooks lunch. He'll wake me up, I'll eat lunch, and then maybe I'll fall back asleep so that I have more energy for the agents. I am really excited about the agents. No, I said all I wanted to say. Okay, bye. We're gonna go through this again, Kim. You're just gonna want out in like 2 seconds. Hold on, oh, I forgot my laptop. Are you gonna want out? All right, we just wrapped up, and oh boy, I got so much information. that was insane. We had 2 hours and we got to speak with 2 different agents and got a lot of really good information. I'm going to try. Oh, you're a jerk, Kim. Come on. No. You go to the door and you go out. That's the rule. And yes, I'm wearing a really short skirt because it is hot and nobody sees my pants anymore, so. But I got so much information. I almost feel overwhelmed. I'm gonna try and summarize it here because, like, hello. So I apologize if this video is a little bit long, but stick with me. I swear I got so much good information. So we had a panel of, I think it was 5 or 6 agents from a variety of literary houses. All 6 were, or 5, were very experienced. They all had authors who were like on the New York Times bestselling list. One of them was, their client was You Are a Badass, which I've heard of that book. I can't remember even all the examples, but it was incredible. And they gave a lot of really good information and we got to ask really honest questions. So I don't even know where to start. I guess, okay, where do I start? I'll start with what we learned about COVID, just because I know, like, on Twitter and I've seen on like Reddit and stuff, this is a concern how COVID is going to be affecting the publishing industry. And a lot of people are like, oh, there's going to be all these unknowns, like they're probably not going to be selling as much and like this is going to affect us. And every agent has said that publishers are buying just as much as they used to. So do not worry about that. It is definitely a happy market because publishers, they said, are always looking 2 to 3 years in advance and they don't want to get behind the game, and so they are still buying. So if that's a concern of yours, don't worry about that. They did say, regarding how COVID has changed things, one con with agents and editors is that right now, like, just as a human element, we're all home, and that brings its own challenges. You know, like if these agents have kids, like there's gonna be things, you know, they've got to be making lunch for their kids now. And so this one agent who was talking about this said that he's more picky. Like queries that he might have been like on the fence about and maybe thinking, like, oh, I'll give this a shot. He's just finding that he's much more likely to start just passing on things because he just doesn't have as much time. Of course my battery is dying. Okay, new battery, new video card. We should not get cut off anymore. Okay, yeah, so that's kind of like the con right now, is that you might be finding people are more picky. But a pro that they all were saying is that right now nobody knows how COVID is going to affect reading taste. So it's almost as if the market has hit this reset button. And so they all kind of just said more than ever, and they all think you should write what interests you anyway, but they said more than ever, don't worry about trying to predict the market because nobody knows. The agents don't know, the publishers don't know, and so, like I said, it's kind of like a reset, which is definitely a pro for authors. Regarding the questions I asked, I don't think I got to all of them, but one question I didn't ask, but that was asked and was passionately answered. So one of my classmates, and this is a very hot topic, and I think it's been for a while, but especially now when it comes to race, is it bad or is it acceptable to write a main character outside your own race? Specifically main character. One agent in particular just gave a really flat, like, don't do it, it's a huge mistake. Not so much saying like you can't tell a good story, but just, especially when it comes to a first-time author, publishers just aren't going to be interested in that. And you could do the best job and like have all the sensitivity readers and, you know, interview all your friends, but just simply it is, when it comes to race and other marginalized groups that are in the spotlight right now, it's just not your story to tell right now, maybe even in general. I say right now just because, like, I think as things move closer to equality, like for example with genders, it's not really read, like my main character is a boy. Like I'm telling that perspective even though that's not my experience. And like if you have a male author with a female main character, it's just more like acceptable right now because we have reached more of this equilibrium of representation. But essentially just There are so many books being queried right now, so many with similar ideas, and a publisher is just very simply like, if there is one book written by a Black author and it's a Black main character versus a book written by a white author and a Black main character, they're gonna go with the Black author. Like, you just don't stand a chance. And like, that's just from I should say an objective standpoint. So putting politics, putting your own opinion aside, just from a very objective, you're not gonna get picked. Like, so it's essentially like a waste of time. Like, don't bother. That's what all the agents said. Like, just don't do it. It's a mistake, and an easily avoidable mistake. So I just thought I would give that hot take because I feel like so many people kind of hedge this and like don't want to give their real opinion. And this wasn't more of an opinion. This was more of a statement, which it was refreshing to hear a concrete statement and not just a discussion about it. And I can talk more about that later because that was actually a concern I talked about yesterday. And it wasn't that I don't have a Black main character or another race main character. My main character is white. He's a male though. But I don't talk about race issues as far as today goes, but I do bring up the Civil War. I guess I'm not focusing on the race issues. I'll have to do some personal reflection on that. I think I'm gonna have to really be mindful to make sure I'm not trying to tell someone else's story or trying to express a point of view that I can't possibly understand, and that would be insensitive for me to do. I'm just gonna have to reflect more on that. I'm interested in your opinion, I guess, on that, but I think as it stands, oh, now she wants to get back in. Rude. I think as it stands right now, I'm in an okay spot because it's not the focus of that character, because you obviously still want diversity too. We'll have that discussion another day. Okay, I don't know. It's something I definitely have to do more reflecting on. So, sorry, I'm like out of breath because I have so much on my mind. The other big thing that I didn't expect to get as powerful as an answer on, if you've been following my videos, you know that originally my novel was a standalone. And then I took a class, was it 2 years ago at this point, wow, which was just writing the novel. And my professor, after hearing my synopsis and my plan for the book, said that this was way too much for one story and that he recommends I break it up into a series. And I was hesitant to do that because I've heard, as a first-time author, if you plan to traditionally publish, it can be harder to sell as a series. So what I asked the agent, I didn't ask them anything at first about selling as a series. I just said, how do you best go about that? Bringing up, I think I've talked about this before, how I had heard they don't like the term they don't like the term series potential because technically any book could be series potential, so they're kind of empty words, and also it just makes it seem as though you don't quite have a grasp on your story itself. I don't know, I did a better job explaining it last time, but and so I kind of was asking their opinion on that, like, do they agree with that statement, or should I say intended as a series? And I asked this question kind of to both agents I talked to, and they both said that essentially, as a first-time author, they confirmed it was a mistake to pitch a series, which was at first very discouraging news because I'm like, crap, now what do I do? Like, I don't think I can fit this whole story into one book. I really agree with my professor, but one of the agents brought up the point, especially because I am pitching a young adult fantasy adventure. She's like, agents are going to know based on that genre alone that your book has series potential. They're going to know you probably already have an outline for a second book, if not have written the first draft of a second book. That just kind of comes with the genre. She said that it's just essentially like, not like a waste of time, but just that you really should be focusing when you're querying your book on that book. You don't want to be talking about all the things that it will need to be a complete story. You want to pitch your story as if, here is my book, it is complete, end to end, solid, because that's how they're going to pitch it to a publisher. Publishers are very less likely, like, not to say that they don't want a series, but they're a lot less likely to take on a book that needs a series to have any sort of complete feeling. And it's just something that can be a discussion with your agent after you get, like, once you get past that querying stage and you talk with them, chances are they're going to ask, Like, do you have a second book in mind? And you can say yes or no at that point and have the discussion from there. But when you query, you should be querying it as a standalone. And to me, this was actually a really important lesson too, because it got me to realize, like, when I heard that, I was like, oh no, like, I just feel like the action in the first one isn't as strong as in the second one, and I wanted to talk about that. And then that was an alarm bell, because that's not how it should be. Like, and one of my agents that I talked to said this too. They were like, if you feel as though your first book isn't strong enough as a standalone, you need to ask yourself why. And if that's the case, maybe the action that takes place in the second book should be more what you're focusing on. You know, it made a lot of sense what she was saying. And it got me to realize I really need to rework my outline, and I really need to up the ante. I was talking to Zach about this, trying to explain how I felt, because essentially with my outline, all I've done, like, I had this outline for a book, realized it needed to be broken into at least 2 books, and so I just went like this. And what happened was, so my second book has that ultimate climax, which, you know, is going to be intense, it's going to be a huge moment, but my first book has like a mini climax, and that's not strong enough as a book. Like, it shouldn't feel as though I've just cut a book in half. Each book, even in a series, each book needs to have that full arc. So there can be questions left unanswered in your book, but if it doesn't have that full arc itself, like, it's not a satisfying book. Like, I think we've all read books in a series that maybe didn't do this well, and we were left feeling extremely unsatisfied and almost like upset that didn't have closure. To give a good example where I think a book does a good job at this, is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So obviously that book was intended as a series. J.K. Rowling wrote 7 of them. But if you read just Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone alone, it feels like a complete book. Like, we, you know, learn about Lord Voldemort, and Harry has his moment of addressing him. It has this intense climax, and even though at the end there's still some, like, Lord Voldemort may come back one day, but, like, he defeated him in that moment, and he had that moment, and he, you know, realized things about himself. There was character growth. It feels like, even though I enjoy it as a series, obviously, I could see, like, it, if it was just by itself, feeling satisfied at the ending of it. And that's the point I need to get my book at. It's not there right now, and that is something I'm going to have to work on in this thesis. And I've been thinking for a while how desperately I need to re-outline, and this has given me that motivation even more, that I really need to re-outline what the climax is going to be, what kind of growth I want my characters to see in that first book, and just being careful that it can read as a standalone if it has to. Because I have read books that were told they were intended as a series, but they could be a standalone, and then I read the first one and I'm like, this is not a standalone. Like, there are so many questions left unanswered at the end. I don't feel any kind of resolution. Like, there was a climax, but to me, it felt very unsatisfying. Even though at that point I knew a sequel was coming, I was really dissatisfied with the ending of the first one, and I was just really surprised that it got sold as a standalone with that kind of arc. As always, disclaimer, I'm sure that could all been explained better, but I am who I am, so let's move on. Oh, so I guess I just wanted to summarize and say, because, like, I admit, like, I've heard this advice before, but I still kind of was going forward as, you know what, this is my story, it is what it is, and if an agent doesn't like it, then they're not the agent for me. And I just, like, really got a reality check with that, because pretty much every agent said, yeah, don't query a book that has to have 3 books. Like, you publishers, like, I think what we don't realize is how competitive the market really is. And I've heard this advice before, but today I just had that reality check again. Like, each agent gets thousands of queries, and I think that was hard for me to wrap my head around. And so if they're even slightly on the fence about a story, like, they like it but they're just not quite sure, you don't want to give them any reason to tip the other way. If that reason is that they see the line, this is intended as a series, and so they're thinking, okay, this book might not feel then complete, and, like, I'm gonna have trouble selling it, they're gonna say no. Like, don't give them any reason to say no, is essentially what I'm saying. And again, I want to stress the point, like, your book can be intended as a series. Just, you don't have to mention it. Sell the individual first book that you've already written, that you've polished itself, and your agent and publisher will ask. That's pretty much what every agent said. They will ask, and that's when you can say, oh, funny you should mention it. I have the outline here for the next 4 books, and you can go from there. So those were really the points that I felt were the most surprising, or that helped me the most with the agents panel. There's a bunch of other questions, but I feel like a lot of the other questions were things I've heard before, that you've heard before, I'm sure too. Like, they all stress how important it is to have your story polished before you query it, because they're just not going to want to take the time to do that with you if you won't even do it with yourself first. So they all stress how important that is. And I guess one thing I'll end on quickly was how much every agent basically said, and I feel like I've just never heard it phrased this way, that a query letter is like a book jacket, and that if you want to figure out the best way to do a good query letter, an enticing query letter, basically take as many books as you can that are similar to your book, or have a related theme or whatever. Read their book jacket, so like that blurb on the inside cover, not the back of the book, but the one on the inside cover. Read that, figure out what they're doing, and base your query letter off those techniques. Not off, like, don't copy theirs, you know what I'm saying. But just, they all said like that's the style you should be aiming for a book jacket. And even one of the agents said that they've actually had an author who their query letter was so good that that's actually what ended up being on the book jacket. Like, they changed it a little bit, but it's like, I didn't realize that's how strongly those two things should relate as far as like tone and the way they tell the story. Which, I mean, reflecting on it, I guess like I always kind of tried to base it off of that, but I didn't so strongly study that. So I thought I would share that tip too. All right, AC's been off now for 16 minutes, so I'm dying. It is 93 degrees Fahrenheit today for all my US friends, which is hot, hot, hot. I don't know what that is in Celsius. But I'm gonna go. This weekend was amazing. I feel like the agents portion, like, that was so much fun, and extremely valuable, and like, oh my gosh, I wish I could talk to agents all the time, even just subjectively like that, like not trying to pitch to them, but just talking to them. And one of them did ask us to kind of like do a little mini pitch, and I was like, oh God, and I was so rusty. I'm pretty sure I did a terrible job. Let's just say she didn't email me asking for my book. But it was really nice to get their opinion. Oh, and I said to Zach, final observation, I just thought it was funny that the difference between like my professors who are writers versus my professors who are editors, the biggest difference is the way they talk. So a lot of my writing professors talk very soothingly and slow and literary and big vocabulary, and then I noticed it more than ever this weekend with like, you know, having other editors and agents on the panel. Everyone in the publishing industry talks really, really fast and to the point. And they like, one of my professors for this weekend, she's actually an editor, and like just her way of speaking is so much different than the co-professor this weekend, who is more of a writer. And it's just, I just thought that was a funny observation. Like the two sides, like parts of the industry, the writers and the publishers, like, or like, you know, the people related to publishing, it's just like night and day. And that's something I remember a lot from when I was in school for journalism. All of my professors were journalists, and they talked really, really fast. So it just like changes the name of the game, or like the tone of it. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. My brain has been on like high drive for 7 days straight, and I'm just ready. I told Zach, tonight's the first night. I've had no homework. I'm not gonna have to stay up late. I'm not preparing for a big day tomorrow. I mean, I'm working tomorrow, but I'm not preparing for like a big intensive day tomorrow. And so I am going to play Sims for the first time in like 2 weeks. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And I might have a glass of wine. Thank you all so much. I hope you've enjoyed this little mini series during Camp NaNoWriMo in July, even though it wasn't related to Camp NaNoWriMo, but it was kind of part of it. And I hope you enjoyed this look at what writing week-long workshop residency kind of looks like. I don't know if other ones look anything like this, but this is the one at the Harvard Extension School if you're interested. You have to be in the program though. Nobody can just join. Sorry. I don't know what else I'm saying. And it's not over though, folks. So this week and next week we are doing we are editing our written work, so basically applying everything we've learned, and that's this week. And then I have that Tuesday, Thursday, and then next week we are doing our query letters and looking into publishing our pieces. So I'm excited about that because I'm gonna have a real editor reading my query letter, which I probably should do my outline before I finish my query letter because it's gonna change. Okay, yeah, fun. So excited. Okay, all right. I will see you guys, not tomorrow, but soon.